Folks who want to know God and are praying and are reading the scriptures and are doing the things you should do hit a space where it feels like the way God has worked in their life before doesn't seem to be working.
Hey, what steps do you take when you can't take one more step? Let's talk about it with Tish Harrison Warren on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here, and you should be glad that we are here, too. If you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter is our executive producer, and he's here. Matthew had been feeling aimless, without purpose, not knowing what the next step was. But then the NFL preseason just arrived, so he's better.
I was on the verge of introspecting.
Oh, don't do
It was
that.
touch and go.
Yeah,
Oh,
almost
man.
watching.
Thank you,
soccer
NFL.
or something.
Our producer Jeremy's in the little glass booth. Jeremy just returned from serving at a music event put on by the NAACP.
That's true.
Jeremy, you're not a DEI hire, are you?
You know, that's pretty deep. I have to think about it. I'll have to ask somebody above my pay grade on that one.
Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. John says if your ears are burning, that means your laptop is talking to Google about you. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. George says fast food restaurants, and I agree with him, by the way, should have a special line for people who already know what they want. I'm a preacher, and I do a lot of cussing in those lines when they just decide they're going over a menu that's been there
It's
for
not Sophie's
40.
choice. Come on.
Oh, man. And Kathy White is the soft, feminine side of the program. Kathy, we're recording this just before your birthday. So, happy pre-birthday.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Well, I couldn't say it, but
Trademark.
But the point.
Sounds European.
We've got a great guest, Tish Harrison Warren. She's an award-winning author and writer whose work has appeared in the New York Times. I wouldn't tell people that. Christianity Today, I'm not sure I'd tell them that. Comment Magazine, among others. She serves as the C.S. Lewis Theological Writer in Residence for the Anglican Episcopal House of Studies at a Baptist University, Baylor. Just to be safe, the George W. Truett Theological Seminary. She's also a senior fellow with the Trinity Forum and an assisting priest at Emmanuel Anglican Church. And her new book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is What Grows in Weary Lands on Christians' Resilience. Why did you write this? Were you up against a wall and decided, preachers, when they preach sermons, if they're smart, they preach them to themselves. Did you write this book for you or for me?
I always write books that I need to read. Essentially, I write to figure out my life, and I write to figure out what I think. And most people can have a conversation with a friend, but I have some genetic disorder where I have to write 80,000 words and edit it to get to be like, that's kind of maybe what I believe. It just takes that to sort of know where I am. And so I was actually writing a different book that I was contracted for. I was working on something else. But in the middle of working on this other book, I was just in a place of feeling uh, spiritually disoriented, not certain where I was. It felt like God was distant. I was struggling with doubt. And my last book, the one before this, is called Prayer in the Night and was about explicitly like suffering and questions of how do you trust God. And what was confusing to me is that there was nothing in my life that seemed, there wasn't like a recent tragedy or deep loss. It was things were okay. Uh, but I was in a time I had been working for the New York Times and left really tired, but also I would say spiritually weary. And yeah, so out of that, I kind of was looking around for how to understand even where I was, and did not find a lot in contemporary kind of Christian work and writing, and then ended up really by accident stumbling upon a book in our house that was the sayings of the Desert Mothers and Fathers, and I picked it up, and I couldn't. I was amazed at how this experience I was having of kind of um uh, kind of a desert season or weariness or just like disorientation, how often they expected this, how much this was talked about. And so I wrote this book to try to figure out where I was, but also to try to give some of the resources I found in the historic church to Christians who are in a similar place to where I was and to some extent still am.
We're kind of provincial, as we think that we're the only people. That's a part of our culture, weariness and confusion and doubt. It's just something that our present culture, but it's always been true, hasn't it? Was that a surprise to you?
Yeah, that was it was a surprise how often Christians have always talked about this and expected this, that they more or less, I mean, you see this in Protestant Reformed writings, also Catholic writings, Orthodox writings. You just see it everywhere, where folks who want to know God and are praying and are reading the scriptures and are doing the things you should do hit a space where it feels like the way God has worked in their life before doesn't seem to be working. And often God seems distant or prayer seems really kind of empty or hollow. It feels like it's not. I mean, the words I use to my husband is like, it's like the line has gone dead, or for listeners under 40, like the call has dropped. And so it was an experience of wanting to know God and not knowing how, and not wanting to like deconstruct or leave the faith loudly, but also not knowing how to keep going. I really didn't know how to do that in a way that was honest and not just faking it. And so I was surprised how much, I mean, Christians just talk about this not only as inevitable, but as important, that it is this like really important part of spiritual maturation, that you hit a space where things don't seem to be working and you learn to keep going and you learn to seek God, not even for spiritual feelings or for an experience of God, but for God himself. And so I was amazed at how often this was talked about. I was also amazed. I mean, I felt like, wait, I've been to seminary, I'm ordained. Like, if this is talked about so much, why didn't anyone warn me? I mean, what I know this is coming. And so it felt like, particularly if you're from evangelical background at all, we talk so much about kind of conversion and newness and being on fire. And And we sometimes have room for like the gurus, the people like at the end of life that have all the wisdom and have made it. But there's this middle part of discipleship. There's these middle stories that are not often told. And I was just like desperate to tell this middle story, but historically it's talked about so much. And I was amazed. Even things in the secular culture like distraction and irritation and boredom that are talked about. It's amazing. I mean, I found these like 5th, 6th century monks that are talking about being so distracted. And I'm like, what do they even have to be distracted by?
When I read the Desert Fathers for the first time, I realized that they constantly dealt with that and with fantasies that kept distracting and pulling them away. And yet most of us, if you're from the more evangelical branch of the church, you probably sang, "I've got joy, joy, joy," down in my... I sang that.
Yeah.
And if I didn't, I smiled anyway.
Yeah.
You
Where?
didn't want anybody to know that you didn't have joy, joy, joy down in your heart. If you don't have joy, joy, joy down in your heart, you got to get this book. You can get it in a brown paper wrapper so nobody will know that you're reading it. It's called What Grows in Weary Lands on Christian Resilience. It'd be a great book for a small group study in your church. And who knows, in that small group, you might get honest. And while that's scary, trust the old guy. It'll be good for you. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're talking to Tish Harrison Warren. Her new book is called What Grows in Weary Land. What a great title. What Grows in Weary Lands on Christian Resilience.
Tish, first of all, the first segment, you were kind of juxtaposing, kind of this broadly spiritual ennui versus like grief and trauma and tragedy. And it's such an interesting contrast because as bad as some of these kind of things are, there's support, everybody knows about it, there's casseroles involved, versus this where you're like, it's probably just me and it's very lonely. So broad question, but when this thing of where it feels like God is withdrawing, I know in developmental stuff with kids, there's this thing of object permanence, where there's a period of time where kids have to understand if dad or mom disappears around the corner, they're still there. You can't see them, but they're still there. And there's a period where they don't get that, and then they do understand that. Is there any parallels there? Is that oversimplifying that? Is there a stage in our spiritual development where God says, you know me, you trust me, now you're not going to see me in order for you to gain this spiritual sense of object permanence?
Thomas à Kempis said, sometimes thou dost withdraw thyself from us so that we might know the sweetness of thy presence. And so that's good. I'm sorry,
Asked
Tish.
and answered. Thank you. Sorry to trouble you, Tish. Thomas à Kempis spoke to this.
We don't need you, Tish. We're doing all right.
And in fact, he's going to be our guest next week.
We will need a Ouija board.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Tish.
go ahead. We're
Yeah,
incorrigible.
I agree. I agree with Steve and Thomas and Kempis.
In that order, I hope.
Yeah, I think there is some. I mean, John of the Cross spoke about this experience, and or wrote about this experience, I should say. This is I believe, 16th century. Sorry if that's slightly off. Spanish mystic. And he kind of uses that analogy. I mean, he didn't speak about object permanence specifically, but he uses the analogy of how uh, we lay aside swaddling clothes, that there is this developmental, like a child growing up, that has to happen in the spiritual life, and that experience feels frustrating to the kid, right? It feels like your parent is withdrawing from you, or it feels unloving. But in reality, I mean, if my 6-year-old, I have this is my youngest, was still in swaddling clothes, like something's gone very wrong. Like, and so I tell this story in my book about and different parts of the Christian tradition talk about this different ways and use different analogies. But I talk about when the Psalm talks about a weaned child. It says, like, I am at rest with God like a weaned child. With like a weaned child is my soul at rest. And I have always resisted it. I'm like, why a weaned child? Because it seems like, a child who is nursing is more like dependent, more connected, more, needy. And certainly we are needy. We ask for daily bread. What's the deal with the weaned part? And it drove me nuts. No one gave me a good I could not find a great answer. It's out there, but no one I talked to did, because people don't think about weaning and breastfeeding as much as I do, I think. But it's a weird. But uh, it when I was weaning my children, I have 3 children. I tell the story in the book about it because there was this time where you realize your relationship has shifted, where your kids aren't coming to you for what you give them necessarily anymore. They're coming to you for you. They want your presence. And so the difference between it, I think the weaned there is because we have to learn to sort of come to God, not for the milk, like not for the good, the good things that come from God's presence, but for God, to God himself, for himself. And so it is this kind of letting go of, I mean, if there's anything this desert season of my own life has taught me, it's how much I want to control God. And I can use the spiritual life and I can use spiritual things to be like, I've put in my input. Now it's like an exchange. The desert season burns that away, where we learn to come to God for God himself, and we learn to receive God's love, not because of anything we've done or any exchange we have, but just out of mercy. And so I think what I'm saying, that was a lot, and I started preaching, but the developmental part is not, that is, some of that language is actually used in the actual writing in the historic church.
That's good. There's, I think it was Saint Teresa said that, help me to love you if there is no heaven, and to fear you if there is no hell. In other words, just you. That's a hard place to get to, because I got stuff that I need to explain to him, and I expect, because leaders have told me all my life, that he'll meet those needs. And when he doesn't, the whole system can crash, except that he's sovereign and he won't let it.
Yeah, I think I realized, I mean, we talk about the prosperity gospel, and the worst examples of this, right, are people that are like, if you pray and if you pray, and usually it's like, and give me a donation, God will give you a new jet or a new car, or like, if you're not healed from cancer, it's because you don't have enough faith. And I reject all of that, but I realized that we can kind of have like a spiritual prosperity gospel, where it's like, if I do my prayers, if I show up to church, if I raise my kids in the faith, then XYZ needs to happen spiritually in my life. It needs to feel a certain way. It needs to be exciting. I need to be able to like whatever this subculture is, like have the cool worship songs on Sunday. And I think even that can become something we demand. Like I can demand a sense of God's presence. And it's not wrong. Of course, it's not wrong to want a sense of God's presence, just like we want healing and good things. But we can instrumentalize God, I think, where we're after a particular spiritual reward instead of God himself.
Oh, man. Listen, you got to get this book. We've talked about negative stuff, and if you're not a believer, you're probably saying, are you crazy? I'm doing fine. A lot better than you are. God does neat stuff, too, and surprising stuff. And sometimes he shows at a party when nobody expected him to be there. And this book is good because it's not only about the weary land, but resilience, too. It's titled What Grows in Weary Lands on Christian Resilience. Thanks for joining us. We're hanging out with author Tish Harrison Warren, and you can keep up with her at tishharrisonwarren.com. And the book is What Grows in Weary Lands.
Tish, it's and I think one of the real values of a book like this strikes me as just preparing people for it. It's like, don't be surprised sort of thing, but also, things you can consider or pursue or do about it. Not that you make it magically disappear, but you use the terms aridity and then acedia, and talk some about those. One of the things about acedia being one of the 7 deadly sins, that it's like, okay, I have this reality of spiritual torpor, is that the right term? And then it's sort of like, okay, but if it's one of the sins, I'm not supposed to just kind of sit there and, wallow in it or enjoy it or something, something to confess and so forth. But anyway, talk some about those terms and that reality.
Yep. So Acedia, Acadia, people have pronounced this different ways. I'm going to say Acedia.
The
Or
proper
Acedia.
way, right. Yeah.
They're all same. It's so before they had 7 deadly sins, the church formulated that. The early church talked about 8 bad thoughts or 8 wicked thoughts, which I sort of love the language of. 8.
That's awful. I'm having trouble with 7.
They blended 2 of them together. Rowan Williams translates it 8 pressures on the soul, which I kind of love. Anyway, Acedia is one of them. It's now translated sloth. I think this is a really anemic and pretty crummy translation because it makes it sound... It makes it sound like just work harder, right? It kind of makes the virtue like workaholism.
Yeah.
Acedia actually is more like a distaste and resistance to things that are good and difficult in our life, meaning the goods that are difficult. So my favorite definition, which I put in the book, is from John Paul II. He talked about acedia as profound sadness that the good is difficult. Like we just want good in our life to be easier. Or Rebecca DeYoung, this didn't make the book, but her definition is a resistance to the demands of love, which I love that definition people. And it's just that, when it feels easier to just sort of scroll on, or doom scroll, or look at Instagram or something, than having to like talk to your neighbor or love your spouse, or have a difficult conversation with a church member or your kid. It's that sort of like, ugh, just leave me alone kind of. But it's a complicated idea. It was often with nostalgia or fantasy. It's kind of a rejection of the life you have for a fantasy life that you wish you had. So it was often talked about as the hardest sin, or the worst. They called it the most difficult battle, essentially. So the now that's Acedia. Aridity is not understood as a sin, and is more like a stage or an environment in the spiritual life where prayer feels really dry. The spiritual life, to use the historic language of the church, we don't find consolation in spiritual things. Like the sweetness that we once experienced in God in certain moments of prayer or whatever feels like it's gone. So the main difference, when like spiritual directors will talk about it, acedia is when the spiritual things or God we have a distaste for it. It's like, ugh, who would want that, right? It's like, bleh, for prayer or church or whatever. And we were looking for distraction away from God. Aridity, we're showing up, we want to know God, we maybe, still doing prayer, like rhythms of prayer or whatever, that, of worship, but we feel like we can't get to God, or God is distant. And so one is like, we're longing for God, but feel like we can't get there. One is we don't, we are longing for God is dulled. The reason there's like books out there, particularly in formation world, where there's like pages and pages and pages separating these. The reason I didn't do that in the book is because hour to hour, day to day, this could look different for me. I could want God and not want God sometimes in the same day. And so parsing that out I put them both in the book and explain them, and they're different, but I don't spend a lot of time parsing it out. And I have more to say about that, but there's time's up.
That is so wise. That it's you can go there and not go there within an hour. It's not necessarily a life you live, but a reality that we face and face often. Hey, the name of the book is called What Grows in Weary Lands on Christian Resilience. And the author, a delight, Tish Harrison Warren. And like Jesus, we're going to come back. Don't go anywhere. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're talking with Tish Harrison Warren. And I told you about the website, tishharrisonwarren.com. Not creative, but you can get there. And then at X, it's Tish_H_Warren.
Makes sense.
It does.
Tish, during the break, you were kind of finishing up a little bit because there was so much with the whole issue of aridity and acedia. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to finish up if there was anything else you wanted to say about it. And also, one of the things that you mentioned was the fact that the remedy is really the same thing.
Right. Yeah. So I talk about both aridity and acedia in the book. I distinguish them, but I don't spend a ton of time trying to get people to figure out which one they are, because I really think they often go together in my own experience. They go, when God feels distant, it's obviously easier to be more tempted to like give up on the faith and give up on certainly if something feels demanding, it's harder. The other reason I didn't include them both, I mean, I do include them both, but the other reason I didn't go deep into the differences is because the remedy of them is very similar. I mean, this is my analogy, not actually in church history, but I think of them as like comorbidities, like heart disease and diabetes. They often go together, and they're different and need to be understood in different ways. But at the same time, like a lot of the solutions are the same. Like, you kind of do the same things to heal both. And the solution for both that the monks, desert mothers and fathers, which are like 3rd to 5th century monks, constantly talked about was what they would talk about staying in your cell, which we would understand as like fortitude or resilience. The idea of like when you are feeling like God is distant, or when you are feeling like you would, rather do anything in the world rather than have to like love your neighbor, pray your prayers, do your thing, to actually stay in it's this comprehensive idea of staying in their literal place that they were in, because their cell's like their room, but it's also the place they prayed. It's the place they worked. So it's staying in your, the things that God has called you to, staying in your vows, and staying in like the rhythm of prayer and seeking God that you have had, and staying in your community, the people around you. So it was this like idea of like sticking with God and sticking with prayer, but also it's a little more comprehensive than just like the evangelical, like keep having your quiet time, although it could be part of that. It's this sort of comprehensive idea of practicing patience and perseverance and fortitude, that I kind of scoop all together and talk about as resilience. And that's sort of the response to aridity, but it's also the response to acedia. It's the way of kind of quote unquote getting through it, which I don't even like to talk about, because part of what it means to battle these things is to kind of surrender to the idea that we don't know how long this will last, and we're not sure what the other side will look like, but we are like seeking God in the moment we're in. And that's kind of what the monks recommend for both.
And Tish, if I'm understanding what you're saying, particularly there at the end, part of this is not just when you say stay in your cell, it's not just gritting your teeth and white knuckling it. It feels like an important component of it is embracing the idea that this is not outside of God's plan. There's just a purpose to it. It's not just meaningless pain. That this is part of God's shaping process, and even if you're still going through it, that's at least something. It feels like there's meaning to it. It's not the meaningless part is what's so enervating, I think, sometimes, at least for me, because it's just suffering and there's no good that's going to come from it. That makes me give up.
Yeah,
you can at least hold on to the fact that God's going to use this. Don't know how, and I don't even need to be looking up towards when am I going to get through this. Just what does God have for me right now?
Yeah, I mean, I do really recommend readers read the book, but I also recommend when they read the book to keep reading, read the whole thing, particularly after the 3rd chapter, because I wrestled with, there are some Christian books that if you read like the first 2 chapters, it's kind of the gist, and they just sort of repeat that again. So you can get away with that. This is one of those things where I honestly think if you just read the first 3 chapters of my book, you will almost get you'll get a good view of Christian resilience, but it will be incomplete to the point that it might be harmful. Like it would be malform you. Like because I hit resilience hard and I hit fortitude hard, because the historic church does and the scriptures do. But then I say, how do we do that in a way that isn't just white knuckling it, that isn't just stoicism? And I spend a lot of time distinguishing what Christian hope and Christian resilience is from just the stoic, life is hard, buck up, suck it up, get through it. And I actually think that if we get that confused, which we often do in American Christianity, of what Stoicism is and Christian faith, like true hope and Christian resilience is, then we end up almost worse off. And so I do spend a lot of time talking about the need for strength and perseverance. But then I take this turn in the beginning of chapter 4, and the rest of the book is kind of like, how do we do that in a way that is honest? How do we do that in a way that is hopeful? How do we do that in a way that's not just going to burn us out more and drive us to the ground and grind us down? Like, how do we do that in a way that is actually aimed at Christian flourishing? Because it's not just weary lands, it's growth that happens in the midst of that. But I don't think that's automatic. I think there's some intentionality in that. And so that's kind of what the whole second half of the book is about.
First 3 are the desert chapters.
That's true. That is such good stuff and so wise. You know, one of the Moravians said to Wesley, how can I have faith if I don't have faith? How can I preach it? He said, preach it till you get it. Then when you get it, you'll preach it because you do. And that sounds like fake it till you make it, but it's more profound than that. And you just said that, and you say that in the book. So this book is not just truthful, it's helpful in a very pragmatic way. Get it? It's called What Grows in Weary Lands on Christian Resilience. Tish, you're great. Thank you for spending an hour with us.
I really love getting to be with you guys.
And you know, an asset you get for doing this is 3 free sins. So be careful. Be careful how you use them.
I've already used them up today.
We all have.
Hey guys, again, the name of the book, What Grows in Weary Lands on Christian Resilience. The author, Tish Harrison Warren. It's a good book. Get it. And we're coming back to tell you who we're going to do it unto next week. Great hour. You know why it was a great hour? It's a great hour because of an honest hour. You know, we got to quit pretending. We just got to stop it. It's so easy. Religion can be a disease, and it can really mess with your head if you let it. And you get with people who are all joyous and happy and living the victorious Christian life. And at least half of them are lying. And the other half are going to experience something that's not victorious later. If we just said that to each other, it would go a long way to be very helpful to a whole lot of people. And the Bible's clear about that. Tish quoted the 131st Psalm about being weaned. There is a time when you say, look, and the disciples did that. Everybody was leaving Jesus. Jesus is easy to leave because some of this stuff is really messy. And then Jesus said, are you going to go too? And Peter said, where do you? No,
he might have said that.
Yeah, he said that.
Would be
But he said, where
That's so Peter.
Yeah, where are we going to go?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know any place else to go. You read Mother Teresa's book was published after she died, and for years she didn't sense God, but she was faithful. She was there, and maybe that's what we need to hear. Is sometimes As again Thomas à Kempis said, sometimes thou dost withdraw thyself from us so we might know the sweetness of his presence. And every Christian I know knows that's true if you'll stop and think about it a while. So let's be honest with each other. It would be very helpful. Leave the lying to me, okay?
And don't discount the power of a donation.
Yeah, and don't, for a certain amount of money, all of this stuff is irrelevant. Who's going to be here next week?
Next week, we have somebody brand new to us. His name is Doug Gruthis, and his book is What If Jesus is Right? Examining
You're going to hell.
examining Jesus' claims about himself in a world full of falsehoods.
That'll be a great program.
Yeah, I think so.
Listen, we'll be here. We have to be. And you should want to be. Same time, same place next week. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide, wide berth.